Coming up on Arirang News, the South Korean health authorities decide to extend the stricter social distancing measures in the Seoul area by another week. The number of COVID-19 cases has come down, but not enough to reopen the affected facilities. The government will soon be giving out another round of coronavirus relief payments. This time, they'll be more targeted, going to those most in need rather than to everyone. And South Korea's doctors reach a deal in principle with the government. The doctors will go back to work, and the government will put off its plans for medical reform for now so they can fight the pandemic. It's 5:00 p.m. here in Seoul. Thank you for joining us on Arirang News. I'm Devin Whiting. The South Korean government has decided to extend its level 2.5 social distancing measures for Seoul and the surrounding area. On Friday, the country reported 198 new cases of COVID-19. That's far fewer than a week ago, but still not few enough. Choi Won-jong has the details.
The South Korean government is extending level 2.5 social distancing measures for the Seoul capital area for another week. The enhanced measures were due to expire this Sunday. But with 198 new cases of COVID-19 reported on Friday, health authorities made the decision to extend the tightened quarantine rules in the capital area until September 13th. However, level 2 guidelines are expected to be maintained for other regions until September 20th.
In order to have better control of the virus prevention system and to have a sufficient treatment network, it is necessary to extend social distancing guidelines until we see a decreasing number of newly confirmed cases.
Due to the extension, restaurants and bars in the capital must continue to close by 9 p.m. and franchise coffee shop will only be able to offer takeout or delivery services. However, during the Friday's COVID-19 briefing, officials added franchise bakeries and ice cream shops to a list of takeout or delivery-only businesses. This is due to a so-called balloon effect, where the customers are moving to franchise bakeries and ice cream shops as their option B. Such establishments will also be restricted from allowing customers to dine in until the new September 13 deadline. As of Friday, South Korea saw 198 new COVID-19 cases, keeping the figure below 200 for the second day in a row. Of those, 189 were locally transmitted and concentrated in the city of Seoul and surrounding Gyeonggi-do province. There were 2 more deaths, bringing the death toll to 331. Choi Won-jong, Arirang News.
Doctors in South Korea have finally reached an agreement with the ruling Democratic Party and the Health Ministry over the government's contentious plans for medical reform. This comes after a 2-week strike by thousands of doctors. But their return to work may take a little longer because not all of the doctors are on board. Lee Kyung-eun has the latest.
The South Korean government's medical reform plans have been put on hold, and thousands of doctors are expected to return to work soon. The reform plans, the core of which were increasing medical school admission quotas and building public medical schools, have prompted thousands of doctors to stage a walkout since August 21st. Putting an end to the weeks-long protest was a 5-point agreement. The Korean Medical Association and Health Ministry met on Friday afternoon, where they agreed to hold plans for the medical reforms and resume discussions once COVID-19 ends. They will set up a joint organization to run the discussions to prevent any unilateral decisions. They also agreed to renegotiate the medical reform plans in a manner that looks to the future and to make joint efforts in the fight against COVID-19.
I sincerely apologize to the public for causing so much worry and inconvenience. We welcome the KMA's decision to return to dialogue and to focus on fighting COVID-19.
These agreements are in parallel with those the KMA signed with the ruling Democratic Party earlier in the morning, which the party hopes could bring positive results for both sides.
We hope those protesting students re-register for the medical licensing exam that they previously cancelled, and we will also work to retract criminal charges against doctors who did not comply with the back-to-work order.
Neither agreement says the medical reform will be scrapped, but the head of the KMA said he believes that it will effectively mean that the talks can resume with a clean slate. However, some doctors raised internal objections, prompting concerns that their return to work may take a little more time. Some 80 trainee doctors lodged strong protests at Friday's signing event between the KMA and the Health Ministry, forcing it to be moved to another site. Lee Young-eun, Arirang News.
Another typhoon is on course to hit South Korea early next week, what would be the third typhoon to hit the country this season. Right now, Typhoon Haishen is southeast of Okinawa, Japan. The storm has now formed an eye with winds of up to 176 kilometers an hour. By the time it gets to Korea, though, the forecast has it a bit weaker than that. On its current trajectory, it'll reach Jeju Island early Monday and move directly north to hit Seoul later Monday evening. The South Korean government is going to pay out another round of relief funds for people affected by COVID-19. Last time, everyone got the payments, but this time the money will be more targeted, not only to help those most in need, but also to save taxpayer money. Ji-young has the details.
The South Korean government plans to roll out another round of disaster relief funds next week, this time focusing on those most affected by the outbreak. In a closed-door meeting on Thursday, the government and the ruling party agreed to provide the second round of COVID-19 relief funds to businesses and self-employed people worst hit by the pandemic.
We will consider the extent of difficulties of the self-employed and small business owners, including restaurants, cafes, and private educational institutes. And we will examine the effect of the current measures and provide stronger financial support for those who are vulnerable.
The first vice finance minister said that the payment is likely to be decided based on the size of the drop in sales of the affected small businesses. The fund will be provided selectively due to the increasing financial burden on taxpayers from the government deficit. The government plans to give each eligible small business owner around $840. The worst hit includes singing rooms, PC rooms, and coffee shops. Meanwhile, the Ministry of Employment and Labor proposed a revised bill on Friday to give financial aid to those businesses that maintain employment for more than 30 days with or without paying their employees. Currently, financial support is only eligible for those businesses who maintain employment for more than 90 days. The government will also provide tailored financial support for non-permanent workers and laborers with special forms of employment. Ji-young, Arirang News.
The latest data on trade show South Korea in July posted its biggest current account surplus in 9 months. Exports were down because of the pandemic, but that was offset by imports, which were down even more. According to the Bank of Korea, the surplus came to $7.45 billion, an increase of 13% from a year earlier. Exports fell by more than 10%, led by petroleum goods and auto parts, and imports were down by 14%, mainly on raw materials like crude oil. Time now for an in-depth look at the market news this afternoon, and for that I'm joined on the line by Mr. Daniel Yu, global strategist at Yuanta Securities. Mr. Yu, thank you for making time today.
Thank you for having me today.
A massive drop on Wall Street overnight, led by tech stocks, maybe the popping of a bubble many analysts said was coming. But what do you say, Mr. Yu?
As you said, U.S. market did quite a bit of a damper in terms of price performance. Dow Jones tumbled by 2.8%, and S&P plunged 3.5%. And the biggest drop came from the NASDAQ, where it dropped almost 5%. A lot of people are saying that this might be the beginning of the bubble pop, but we don't think that's the case. It is just a process of taking some profits, and it is a very healthy movement, given the fact that if you look at just the NASDAQ itself, within a month or so, it rose by almost 20% in a short period of time. From the bottom to top, NASDAQ was up almost 82% from the March end to now, or the peak recently. So the time of correction was kind of necessity in order for the market to further go up in the future. The concern right now is regarding the level of the liquidity condition versus the actual economic numbers. And the economic numbers are not recovering as likely to, as as we hoped. If you look at the also the most recent number of ISM PMI number for the service sector, it came in slightly lower than expected. However, though, we think that continuation of liquidity injection as well as the government's budget increases and also the fiscal policy increases, we think that economic recovery should be coming through as expected, as planned. So for the time being, the correction was quite severe, but it was a necessity that is needed for further interest in the future.
Understood. And here in Korea, stocks down sharply today, too. The Kospi and the Kosdaq, several factors going on there, of course, the U.S., but also this extension of social distancing in Korea. Tell us about the domestic markets.
Yes, Korea did show some correction, but it was much better than U.S. market correction. If you look at the Kospi, it was down by only 1.15%, and also Kosdaq was down by only 0.93%. If you compare that to U.S. market, it is only 1/3 or even less of the correction that we saw from the U.S. side. The current concern, obviously, is once again sharp valuation rise, where the fundamentals are not improving as quickly, but the prices for most of stocks were risen quite significantly. We think that more efforts by the government is necessary, and the ruling Democratic Party of Korea Lee Nak-yeon noted that his party will speed up the discussion with the government for the nation's fourth extra budget this year, while the finance minister Hong Nam-ki said that fourth supplementary budget plan was under review, and the government will soon reach a conclusion in regards to this. If this actually happens, we think that risk appetite for the equity should come back. For the time being, people are still concerned about this COVID-19 new cases, and the numbers are declining, but nevertheless, it came in at 195 new patients on Thursday. I think that number needs to go down to below 100 in order to see the social distancing going from 2.5 to below 2. Government have decided that the social distancing of 2.5 will be lasting until the 13th of September. So obviously domestic consumption or domestic demand side of the numbers will not be looking good, whereas the export numbers are coming in better than expected.
And speaking of exports, Korea's current account surplus in July was the biggest in 9 months. Some are calling it a recessionary surplus, though. What stands out to you about these trade numbers?
Sure. Clearly, it is a recessionary surpluses. If you look at the June, the numbers came in at second straight month of surpluses, and it was one of the highest numbers that we've seen in a while. The total number came in at 3.33 billion current accounts. The current account surplus reached, 19.17 billion from January to June, and it turned to surpluses from the deficit number in April of 3.3 billion deficit. The number overall seems to be in a reasonable right track, and if given the fact that we are seeing the COVID-19 pandemic issues and that the domestic demand numbers are not going to be as strong as expected, then we think that the surplus numbers are going to be probably further rise rather than go down as export improves while domestic demand sluggish. And we think that kind of trend should continue in the future. And also the current account surplus is also is important, where the foreign direct investment as well as the net purchase of the equities by foreign investors matters. And that number seems to be fairly stabilizing versus to what we saw significant selling out over the last first 6 months or so. So all in all, we think that the current account surplus numbers should not go down in the future, but further go up. And if that happens, we don't think that currency depreciation will be anything significant. Right now, the currency trades at around 1180 to 1185 range bound. We think that should stay for in the future.
Got it. All right, Mr. Yu, thanks so much for sharing your insights today. Have a great weekend.
Thank you. You too.
South Korea's foreign minister has highlighted the need for countries to allow business people and workers to make essential trips overseas while maintaining a thorough quarantine system. In a virtual meeting Thursday with her counterparts from the G20 countries, Foreign Minister Kang Kyung-hwa said South Korea will continue to expand its fast-track entry program. So far, the country has fast-track systems with China, the United Arab Emirates, Indonesia, and Singapore. The G20 members also discussed ways to properly manage their borders amid the pandemic and to support their nationals when bringing them back home. And that brings us to the end of this newscast. Thank you for watching. More live news coming your way at 7 p.m. Korea time.